Hello and welcome to the AfterParty, conversations with SpyParty players. Today I'm talking to Tim Fowers.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, nothing too much, sitting in a bedroom in my Aunt and Uncle's home in BC. What about you?
Yeah, I'm in my living room here in California.
Nice, sounds good. So, I don't actually know what your username is in SpyParty, because we know you from a different context, or tangential context to SpyParty.
Yes, yes. My username is Fubeka in SpyParty, but I am not an active user.
Hmm. Yeah, instead you were someone who you
Yes.
you had played and did you know Chris beforehand? Or
Um. Yeah. 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 So the history is, I about when SpyParty went public, I started. I was pretty interested in the concept. Thought it was super clever. And I had been an independent video game maker myself, um, and had been going to GDC. And I think it was my second or third trip to GDC. Chris did a call for volunteers to demo at his IGF booth. Um, Before there was because at the point it wasn't even public yet, so there was no, there wasn't like, and I don't think there was a forum either. Um, and so I volunteered, and then I had Andy Schatz kind of vouch for me, the creator of Monaco, and so it was just a couple of days to put it together, um, and I did it, and I had a lot of fun demoing it for people. It was just the ballroom, I believe, at the time, in that build, and with like the original four missions. And so that's kind of my biggest contact with the game was early on, and I've kind of followed it since, but I have not played a lot in the last few years. But you know, kind of admired from a distance.
yeah, I feel like that's a lot of people's engagement with Spy Party. It's like I think they've heard about and that they're interested in. They sort of uh, just taken little snippets of it, and sort of gone, okay, that's interesting. I'll like wait to see what comes of it later.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So what brought you around into what now is the Spy Party community was a board game.
Yes. Yes. So, I've moved around a little bit. I actually got into the video game industry. I worked for Amazon for 3 years, being a video game designer. But the whole time I've been working on board games, and so I've got three published games, and I've mostly been into self-publishing lately. My games being Walkstar, Paperback, and Burgle Bros. Um, and just this is just like less than a month ago. I was just I was just noodling around about the novelty. I think we were playing a game called Tragedy Looper, which is an interesting board game out right now, very asymmetric. And I kind of got thinking about, well, what's the king of asymmetry? And I'm like, well, it's Spy Party. And I'm like, well, could you do a board game that you have very similar roles in that one observer and an actor? And I'm like, yeah. And I mean, I am I mean this is I'm very baselined in the original Spy Party, so I was kind of like, okay. And I got thinking about what that generally would look like as a concept. And I had an older concept of these Magic 15 cards that a friend of mine came up with, um, where it's six choose two. It's all the combinations of two colors from six on 15 cards, and they have some interesting properties to them. And I just kind of started to put it together. I forgot how it all came together, but I put that in, and it happens that right now there's 15 nice little portraits from the Spy Party characters. I'm like, well, that's cool. So I printed them all out, and I did a couple of iterations. Um, I forget how it started, but I realized that I needed to have um, stands because I needed the spy to be able to see everyone and the sniper to not see everyone. And I wanted to generally have the sense of kind of unraveling that the spy is trying to accomplish missions. And so the first question was like, how does that bookkeeping even work without a computer? And I'm like, well, four missions isn't that bad, but combining that with the colors, I'm like, well, it probably represent game state. Like if he's and I just started to go right off of the missions. I'm like, well, um, for the first two were pretty easy. I'm like, well, what if we had an ambassador and he had to be adjacent to the ambassador to bug him? And I'm like, okay, that's doable. And then I'm like, okay, well, what else is there? There's double agents and there's a fake double agent. There's banana bread, and that's just in the same conversation. I'm like, okay, that's doable. And so I started to come up with a structure of like these different kind of conversation circles in the game, and and then I'm like, well, then I leveraged what the cards were good at and came up with these color combinations to represent kind of the abstraction of the microfilm and statues missions. And then it was just kind of like turning the knobs and figuring out, okay, how does the bookkeeping work? And then after it was kind of already working, I'm like, well, why don't we have little paper clips you can put on cards for highlight, low light? Um, and it was kind of together. And so just did a couple tests to kind of tune it towards some kind of parody where um, the spy feels sufficient pressure, both with time and with information leaking, and the spy, as much as he starts in kind of in a zero information situation, he can actually gain a lot of information through motion and
through like the direction of cards,
yeah,
going, okay, I've seen this card moving about, so I feel like this is
yeah,
what's
through the
moving.
motion of the
Yeah.
cards plus through the deduction of the colors, what is needed to accomplish certain things, um, and the timing of missions, and we're still playing with a lot of these rules, but I guess a big breakthrough with a lot of it, the way to obscure your motion in this situation was swapping. Was that I can swap these two cards between rooms, and I can move anybody. There are some other games that do this. There's a great game called Mr. Jack, where there's I think 8 characters, and it's almost like Clue, but one player is trying to get Mr. Jack out of the city. Um, there's different ways for him to escape. All the while giving up information on who he might be. But every turn, both players take a turn moving 2 people, and so
Okay,
you
so
may.
it's not asymmetric. It's two players both trying to get someone out of the city.
No, one player knows who Mr. Jack is, the other one is trying to capture him.
Ah, okay.
But they're both doing the same actions. They're both like, I move these 2 people, and then you move those 2 people, or no, I think it's I move 1, you move 2, I move 1, and then we rotate to the next 4 people, and then you do 1, 2, 1.
Okay.
And but at the end of each of those cycles, you have to say whether Mr. Jack is illuminated or not. And so there's all these street lamps, and there's one person that has a flashlight, and you just have to say whether he's illuminated or not. And so you get binary searching pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and so one player is trying to position, kind of divide the people quickly. And then even if you know who Mr. Jack is, if you don't have enough turns to capture him, or you're not positioned to capture him, or you don't have control of him that turn, you might not be able to succeed. And then there's Mr. Jack Pocket, which is really a micro game. And this is kind of a micro game too. Micro game is generally like less than 20 cards, less than half an hour. I mean, SpyParty is probably the longest micro game I know of, but it's so light on components that it just doesn't take a lot to make the game, and so that's generally the term micro game. But there's a lot of like logistical problems to do. Aside from the game, I was headed to PAX in a couple weeks, and it really was just a coincidence that's the time that Chris is out with his booth and everybody is there. So I emailed him, say, hey, I've got this board game. Are you gonna be around? And of course he's like, head cut off, running around. He's like, oh, sure, but things are gonna be crazy. And I'm like, okay. And so I brought my prototype, and I guess you can tell that side, the story from your side.
Well, the story from my side is actually kind of boring initially because I had flown from Australia, and the first night of the show, when we were all going to see a board game. At the time, I didn't know that that's what we were going to see. So all of my interaction with your game has been surprised. Like, oh, we're getting a look at it. Getting a look at Tim's new game now, and then the following night I didn't know we were looking at it again. So like, oh, I get to see it again. But for the first time, I was still recovering from jet lag, and so I
Oh yes.
and your game is interesting because Chris described it's like supercharged Clue or something along those lines, where it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Clue, but it's an actual challenge. It's not just like a boring rote task of okay, it's not this person, maybe it's that person. So I just like
yeah.
could not grasp the game at all because I was so freaking tired. But then I, I think it was the following night went with
All
uh,
right, 2 nights later, yeah.
yeah. 2 nights later, I tagged along with Chris and Kate and actually got to see the game in proper, and yeah, I found it very engaging. It's it's interesting how well like I hadn't anticipated just like how well so many of the sort of concepts of Spy Party carry over um, to a really stripped down card game. As you say, it's there aren't many moving parts to it.
Yeah, cool. No, it was really kind of fortunate how the pieces came together. Most of it was just I guess the main pieces were getting the cards facing the spy, swapping cards, and then the color, the set of color of every character has two colors, and then that with the that allowing some deduction in conjunction with motion, because you could do a purely behavioral game, and there are a couple. There's one called Caves, I think, in board games where everyone's placing different colored cubes or something, um, but you don't know who is which color,
Hmm.
and so then there's this kind of like I need to obscure my behavior so that they can't counterplay me until it's very late in the game. Um, and I've seen that in maybe two other games just from descriptions. Um, but yeah, so this one it's like there's a little bit of that, but I think the two main mechanisms of movement and color matching, and then the slow reveal of everything, because you can do nothing when everything's revealed because it's kind of perfect information. Well, you can still do it in the open, like it's high risk, but you can still do some with all the cards revealed for a particular mission. You can still do it as long as they think it's a decoy,
Yeah,
that you're accomplishing a decoy mission. So yeah, so it was really well received by the players. So the first night was just with some of the Spy Party community, and I was super happy how well it was received, because it's really just kind of like built for Spy Party fans. I mean, the level of intensity of the game is and logic in the game is way higher than what I've done before. And my games are usually light casual kind of stuff. And so it was great to have it received by kind of the audience it was intended for. And that just was, really, really great. And then having Chris, kind of be like, this is pretty solid, and we're gonna see where it goes from here. We're gonna continue to noodle on it and see if we can get it to a place that we're both really happy with it, and get it out there at some point.
yeah. He seemed to really care about it. I remember walking back from the cafe, the two of you in heated conversation. He's been very eager for you to keep on it and make it as good of a game as it has the capacity to be. So that was quite exciting to see.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, so I'm really jazzed about it, but Chris takes his time, so this may be people aren't gonna see this on store shelves anytime soon. But but I did decide to just go ahead and put it up in these SpyParty forums, because why not? I mean, I could be more secret about it, but at this point, I'd really appreciate as many eyeballs on it as we can get, and trying different kind of variants, with these kind of base rules we've started with, to hopefully get it to a good place. So it's up there, and you can print it out and try it out. And somebody made a 3D printed version of it,
Yeah, I saw that. That was nuts.
which is just awesome. Um, and I need to, I gave my copy to Chris, so I've got to rebuild my copy and try some of these rules people have come up with.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I'd love to play. To play, we could do a Skype match if you'd like.
Ah,
Uh,
that'd be interesting at some point later on.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I want to take it back to talking about the rules and the sort of mechanics of the game as you're trying
sure.
to figure them out, and that's sort of what was exciting to see in that match between Chris and Kate was it's that part in the game's development where you're both trying to grasp the rules of the game and trying to decide what the rules should be, and it's just like
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah
Everything's kind of fluid, and you're trying to. I mean, you feel like you have to digest it to a certain extent. You need to
yeah
understand what are the emergent behaviors coming out of this simple rule set. I mean, one of my sayings that I stole from someone, is that board games are software that run on people. And
yes
so you have to make a rule set that's simple enough that you can keep all of it in your head, and work with all of it. And that's I guess where board games surprise people is all the rules are in your head. So when you're surprised by a board game, or it's usually through some interaction you didn't foresee. Um, and also how different rule sets can get you to different emotional states. And yeah, and how to do that in a really minimalistic way. But yeah, yeah. So we were like evaluating it and understanding that everything is in flux, and so you have to figure out like, okay, I want this to feel a little bit more like this. How do I get there? Do I change the rule in this way and that way? Do I throw the rule out and start over?
Mm.
Um,
The interesting question that came to mind for me is like it's a very interesting board game just on its own, but also because it's an adaptation of an existing game, and so there's this interesting thing of like asking yourself, okay, should our decisions be driven towards trying to be as like close of an adaptation as Spy Party
breaking up.
of like trying to emulate every sort of quality of that game, or should we be pushing towards like interesting like emotional states that the game gets that are like specific to this game, like things that you don't get in Spy Party.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things going on there. First of all, there's like game whispering, where there's like you play the mechanic itself, and you kind of like listen to it, and you're like, what is fun about this mechanic? And is it going where I want to go? And then you can decide, do you want to steer it, or do you want to like maybe just take one piece of that game and strip out everything else, and play with that interaction, and maybe that spins off into its own board game. And they have to listen very carefully to these things. But in general, if you have a strong mechanic and a strong theme early on, I find things go very well. I mean, that happened with a couple of my games. Really, like all three of my published games came from a spot of early on. I knew the theme, and I knew the general mechanic. And then as you design, you just go back and forth. You're like, okay, what else would happen in this theme? And then you're like, okay, what else would happen? What else can happen in this mechanic? Like, what else can it do? What other states can emerge?
Yeah, no, it's
Um,
very interesting. So
and so that's why like I was really fortunate to find the card mechanic and the swapping mechanic early, and now it's just like Spy Party. It's like, well, what else would happen in Spy Party? We got these missions, we got maps, we have different quantities of players. How flexible is the mechanic? And so that's what part of what me and Chris started talking about is like, Can there be a smaller game? Can there be a larger game?
Hmm.
How flexible is this? And stuff that we just need to try.
Hmm. Well, yeah. Oh, and actually, there's a reminder. I'm like looking at our counter. It says 21. That was one of the crazy coincidences you found is that so at the moment there are 16 characters in the game, but they're fitted to 15 different cards because two of them are twins.
Yep.
And one of the coincidences you found was that one of the next coinciding numbers of combinations was 21, which will be the final cast if you count each of the twins as separate characters.
Yeah, yeah. So the main numbers are, and it's just based on choose. So you got 5 choose 2 is 10, 6 choose 2 is 15, and then 7 choose 2 is 21. So yes, I mean 6 is kind of the best for because of the missions that use 3 full characters. But I'm sure we can figure out a way to do a 5 choose and a 7 choose game. Now you could go all the way down to like 4 choose 2, which is 4, which isn't super interesting. That 4 choose 2 is
It would
4,
be
right?
like Uber balcony.
Yeah, yeah. So I think 5 and 7 are as good as it's gonna get. Let me check here. 4 choose 2. Oh, 6. Well, maybe.
Maybe. Hey, it's in flux. We could try it out.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you could do 3 groups of 2 and swap between them. Yeah, it may be possible.
Hmm, hmm. So yeah,
Um,
one of the sort of foundational interactions of the game, like how the turns work, is that it the the spy starts. They get to swap two cards for each other between conversation. I call them conversations or rooms. What do you call them?
I did rooms, but conversations are probably more accurate. I mean, they're meant. I mean, it was. I was just calling them rooms to help other people, like to
Hmm.
help people that didn't know Spy Party. So they're like, oh, they're in different rooms, so they're talking with each other. But quite literally, they're meant to be kind of the 4 areas in um, uh, in the ballroom.
Right, right. So there's four groups of cards. There's a group of five, four, and two of three. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, yeah, there's some things I did where I wanted to make it feel like, how there's the opposite bookshelves.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it feel like there's some kind of like I can't just go directly between them, and kind of other reasons have emerged, and so I put them in a specific in like a ring in a square, so you can't go from any room to any room, and it forces the spy to have to move across the map.
Right. And that then feeds the deduction game where the sniper knows that okay, if the spy wanted to get to this group, they would have to make two moves. They're um,
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to have to like be more circuitous.
Um, I'm trying to remember what the first. I'll have to look it up. But the first version of the rules, there was. Oh, so they were all in a line. There was a group of 3, then a group of 4, then a group of 5, then 3 in your hand, just because they're standing up.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you had to swap linearly up and down this. And one of the missions you had to do in the very front room, and one of the missions you had to do in the very back room. Um, and and then the AMBA and the DA were in the middle 2 rooms. No, was that? Yeah. And so there's kind of like, and so basically, and there was fewer reveals. There was no reveals at the beginning. And so having to have them in specific rooms made it like basically you just looked for one character to move all the way from the back to the front. Um,
Yeah, which I would assume became pretty reductive pretty quickly.
yeah, yeah. It yeah. It basically there was like the spy it had a lot of cover, and the sniper had very little to go on except for that one piece. But then when I play when I played the early Spy Party, the main tell for me is all I would do is watch a bookshelf, or I would just watch the bookshelves, and almost always there would be the bookshelf tell, and or they would try to take the book between, and all I had to do was watch for that. And at my level, and this is like with all the new friends that I had introduced it to and stuff, and so I could kind of always get it with that.
Yeah.
But you know, but so I guess it was kind of that's what was coming through for me, and I'm like, well, you could just try to obscure that, and then the realization that I'm like, well, let's break that out, and let's let you do. I think there was another rule or two that evolved from that linear version.
Yeah. So we probably should specify in the current build how it works is that the spy gets to swap one character for another between conversations, and then the sniper gets to reveal one character.
Yeah, yeah. So, and in the beginning, he gets 3 reveals. Basically, the sequence. I mean, the sequence is like swap, declare any missions complete. Then the spy or the sniper picks one to reveal, which just reveals it because initially they're all not facing him, so it's like Stratego. And so slowly he's unraveling. Okay, now I know who this person is, and then I'm trying to backtrack and figure out who he was next to, and it has that sense of like trying to put the situation back together, like you do in Spy Party. You're like, okay, who was there? Okay, what was that? Was that a situation? Was something going down right there?
Yeah, it's very interesting. One of the interesting challenges that sort of came up in conversation with starting this game, that Chris brought up, and this sort of feeds into the discussion of this being an adaptation of an existing digital game, is the idea of time pressure, and this sort of discussion of like, okay, like what rules should be used to like try and pressure the spy for time, and in particular, like how do you try and get the feel of something like overtime, where the spy finishes their missions in just before their timer runs out. The sniper overhears that the overtime has now ticked on, and now they like know that they have to make a last second decision to shoot somebody. Like
yeah. Yeah, and yeah, so we're playing with the end state of like, at what point can the spy declare victory? Does he have to wait a turn to declare victory? But I think before we get to that, I think trying this new rule of revealing the AMBA and the DAs up front, but not declaring when missions are complete besides banana bread is the current iteration I want people to try. And I think that could get to a state of like 10-second rule and overtime in a more natural way.
Okay, so it'll be kind of like Jenga. With the 10-second rule, I mean, in Jenga, after you remove a piece, you have to wait 10 seconds. It's 10.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, it's like Jenga. I'm like, yeah, it's yeah. So we'll see. So I think we're turning bigger knobs right now. But I think we could still get to some of those kind of like tense end game states of whether like I finish my missions, I need to wait 10 seconds, and then overtime, like okay, I'm going to win. You can take a shot, but at the same time, I think the overtime would only happen if because right now the game clock is once everyone is revealed. So the spy only has 12 moves in the current state.
Yeah. So
that would be the
time.
end.
Yeah.
So like if he completed his missions and the final card is revealed, yeah. So if he's completed his missions and the other guy reveals and he said, and so then. So if his mission was just completed and he was going to have to wait another turn to declare it, or whatever, or wait another turn to win. I mean, if it was an undeclared mission. So this is very like in the weeds. Like this is very
Yeah,
specific.
yeah.
But I think you could still get to a state where they're all revealed, but the spy says, "I have completed all my missions." In which case, then he has to take the shot.
Hmm.
Because it's like, if you don't shoot now, I will win. Um, so I think we can still get to that state. But that's something we were discussing specifically with Chris and the place we'd like to get. But I need to see how deductive the kind of the new state is. Is it playable with the amber revealed up front? Because it does eliminate a lot of people, but since you don't know who they are yet until you show them, you haven't given up much information. Or could we start with both DAs, but not the AMBA? We kind of just need to try those combinations. But I think it would get even closer to the game if we can. And I had tried this. It's just I needed to give something for the sniper to work on, and so we said, okay, well, you have to declare missions, and it helps with bookkeeping.
Yeah, totally.
So we will see. I mean, anytime I change something, I need to kind of change it in both directions. Because right now, there's some semblance of balance. It's in some ballpark where it's not really lopsided. So right now, I feel like anytime I change anything, I need to kind of change in both directions, unless it's something relatively small like highlighting. But I mean, there's whole layers of things going on with this game that SpyParty doesn't have. Like, imagine SpyParty where you could see the highlights. What would that do for you? As a spy.
Yeah, I mean, that does kind of feed into the digital spy party and the laser. Um,
Yes, yes, there's the laser, and you can fake it, and there's kind of all those things going on. So, yeah, but now there's even just the whole concept of it's a face-to-face game, and
yes,
so you think you can stay cool, in Spy Party under pressure, but do you have a poker face? So can you play this? Can you play it cool in person?
and
Is
that
kind of
yeah,
you know
and
that
and,
that's
and
go ahead.
that happened in Kate and Chris's game. There was a point where Kate just glanced at her spy, and Chris the spectator was like, I can see that you're glancing at that card. She's like, shit.
So yeah, so I mean it's really bringing it home in that sense where you've got to like watch who you're looking at, and how you respond to things, um, you know, how long you take, how confident you are. And there's these plays too where like, there's a couple you missed it with when we had the whole group playing, like where he would swap two people in two rooms or two conversations, and then like he would look straight at him, and while keeping eye contact, he would reveal a person in an unrelated room, and it was the Amba, right, like dead to rights had him. He's like, what? It was just like, and he was totally guessing, but it was just one of those like, I'm in your head, like it was great. So I'm hoping to get those kind of moments out of the game. But
Yeah.
again, in general, I mean, I guess I'm more concerned. I think we really need the 6 or the 10 player game just for the beginner player. Like I think it's just going to be, but even then, it's just going to be a heavy game, and so I don't want it to be not what it is, but at the same time, I don't want to scare people off. But it's definitely I want to tune it around Spy Party and get it to about the same place. Just you have a different set of things that are going on, and time pressure means a different thing. You have all the time in the world to both put together a situation and pick it apart as a sniper. But in the end, you only have one person to reveal, and so we may put some sand timer in the box just so there's people can't take forever on their turns, and so they feel some pressure. But it would be like a 2 or 3 minute sand timer.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and yeah, and I suppose it does give it that like it does make it a different experience. The fact that it is more discreet than Spy Party, like Spy Party, because it's simulating characters
yeah,
continuously moving around. Like that's just a different flavor. Um, and
yeah. And I mean, the cool thing here is you can leave the spy in one spot, and and have everyone come to him to complete the missions.
Yeah.
But it all comes with different risks. But yeah, so there's some fundamental differences. But I was really, really happy with how well it lined up. And so yeah, I just want to get people playing it, and let's get to a good place, and then we'll see where it goes. Hopefully we'll release it. I mean, I self-publish board games, and I mostly sell them direct, similar to what Chris does. And you can check out my previous games on Fowers.net. I have links to kind of all my games, but oh,
I'll link it here as well. Oh, you still there? Uh-oh. One moment, everybody.
And
we're just having. Yep. Okay, we're back.
sorry, what?
We're back. Sorry. I think we just cut out for a second.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just rambling about another game. Yeah. So
I will link to Fowers.net though in the.
Yeah, Fowers.net, and then, so there was this. I have another game, Burgle Bros, which kickstarted in March and did phenomenal. And it started as kind of a Monaco the board game. If you know the game, it's a heist, co-op heist.
And
yeah, I believe he shared a booth with SpyParty at some point.
Yeah, first PAX 2010, they shared a booth, and then they had in the corner Jonathan Blow's game, The Witness.
Oh yeah, yes. Speaking of long-term production.
Yes. Although apparently that's soon to be announced for actual release date.
Oh wow, well, miracles can happen.
Anyway, Burgle Bros.
Yeah. So I mean, I've always I've really loved stealth, and I mean, Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow is kind of my grail game. But there's Invisible Ink kind of got me going, and Monaco. I always wanted to kind of make something similar to what Monaco does before it came out, and then when I was making video games, and then once Monaco came out, I'm like, oh man, he made the perfect heist game. So I approached Andy early. I'm like, hey, so this could be maybe Monaco the board game, and at the time he wasn't interested. But later on, when he kind of understood how the rules went, he's like, oh, okay, cool. And so we made a bundle for the Kickstarter campaign for a copy of Monaco and Burgle. And that was kind of be a similar situation. If it didn't work out with Chris, I was going to maybe take my Burgle characters and make kind of just my own, SpyParty type game without any direct reference to SpyParty. And it might have evolved in a different direction without SpyParty anchoring it. Because right now it's like it's very anchored to SpyParty gameplay, and so I need to. I'm trying to replicate it in a very specific way, and it might have wandered a little bit more if there wasn't that association. So
yeah, having a theme could definitely help drive.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, so far it's holding up, and but and hopefully we can get it there. But if it doesn't, then it's all good.
Yeah, won't be the end of the world.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm just going into full-time board game development right now.
Awesome.
Paperback and Burgle are doing very well, and so I'm going to be developing SpyParty. I've got 2 other games in development. One that might be of interest to the community is called Flowchart, in conjunction with David Serlin, using his Fantasy Strike characters. It is a fighting game where you build the brain of your fighter as you play, and so you're kind of building these logical gates that determine, what moves you will do next.
I think I've heard of this. Oh wow! So that's your brainchild.
Yeah, it's kind of been on and off in development, but we're actually trying to move towards a fall Kickstarter for it. Trying to balance the characters and see what else it needs and figure out what we're going to do for production value, like how we're going to do tiles or cards or things like that. And then we'll see what else. Like SpyParty wasn't on my radar at all, and it kind of came together quickly. But that's kind of been the MO for some of my other successful games. Was just I had an idea, a rough idea, and within like a week or two, I have the theme and I have the core mechanic, and then spent a lot of time polishing it. So 6 months or a year polishing it from there. So that's what Spy Party feels like right now. So I'm pretty bullish on us getting there, but we will see. This is super early, so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time to give us a sneak peek of what the process has been like so far.
Yeah, no, 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 thanks for having me, and yeah, get on the forums and check it out, and let's talk there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, Tim Fowers.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Cheers, man.
Bye.